Greetings. My name is Zoila Ellis Browne, and I will be reading the story, The Salt Pickers, which is taken from my short story collection, The Salt Pickers and Other Caribbean Stories. I hope you enjoy. The Salt Pickers. Salt in your blood. Just like you left-handed and your brother's left-handed, you can't change a thing. But Mother Rachel, I can't stay to pick salt all my life. And what else you will do, you stupid child? Where else you will go? You don't know no other place. All you know is this island. You know what happens to girls who leave? Naifa carelessly shrugged her shoulders. She drew a circle on the sandy floor of the hut with her bare feet. The soles of her feet were cracked and dry from walking up and down without shoes. Girl, don't turn your back on me when I'm talking to you. You know what happens to them? They die. That's what happens. They die. I am 21 this year. I want to leave this island. I want to see the outside. I want to teach like Mrs. Charles. Girl, look at the size of you. You're short and skinny. Your hair not long and you're not pretty. How you think you will make out outside this island? I know you want to leave since you're 15. I thought by this time you turn 18, you would learn. But you still ain't learn. Nowhere better than here. Here, here, I hate here. I wake every morning and pray that God strike me dead so I could leave here, even if it's in a box. Naifa, make the sign of the cross. No, kneel down right there. You know what wickedness you're saying? Pray to God lightning don't strike you down right here where you're standing up in this kitchen, or I will call Pointer Charles to pray on your head. Mother Rachel stood up to her full 6 feet of solid muscle and slammed her broad black hand hard on Naifa's shoulder, forcing her suddenly to the ground. Naifa's knees scraped hard against the dirt floor. Mother Rachel's left hand gripped Naifa's bony shoulder, bearing down. Shaking her right hand in the air, Mother Rachel lifted her round face upwards to the sky, looking through the holes in the thatch roof as if searching desperately for answers. Oh, you come so hard. Pointer Charles didn't talk to you just last Sunday about obedience and submission? My Jesus, how I bring forth a demon to make my last days bitter like aloes. Is my own child, but I swear to God I didn't raise her so that she could blaspheme against thy holy name. Is the salt she hate? Lord God, not you, never you. With a hard push, she flung her daughter away from her. Girl, get out of my sight before I do something God will hate me for. Go to the salt pond now before it gets dark. You still have to pick your amount. You hear? Naifa didn't wait. Pointer Charles. He had talked to her after evening service the previous Sunday. He had more than talked to her, touching her face, pressing his lips on her mouth, telling her what he wanted to do to save her soul, exhorting her loudly. Submit, my child, submit. She had kicked him, flung his hands away, and ran. She wanted to keep on running forever. Thinking about that again, she picked up the white pigtail bucket and was up and out the door, her legs flying down the hill to the salt pond. When she was almost there, her feet dragged to a stop. The sun was high. Sweat beaded her black skin. Her dress was wet. She could hear the songs of people in the salt pond. She looked at the bucket in her hand. It said 25 pounds. God, how me gonna full this up by myself? Even if I sleep out here picking all night, it will never get full. Mother Rachel was right. God was punishing her, making her suffer because she hated to gather the salt that put food on their table. She thought about Pointer Charles, the black mole on his left cheek, the dark, mean eyes, and thin, sweaty hands which stayed too long on her neck and stroked her collarbone when she bent down in front of him to receive the blessing. Trembling, she knelt down with the bucket. Handful by handful, she carefully began scraping together the precious white salt. As she picked the salt, she listened to the sounds of the village as it grew dark. Women were shouting at children to bring in the goats, grind the corn, shell the peas, or come inside and bathe and do homework. Here and there, flambeaux flickered as villagers walked from one part of the village to the next. Only Pointer Charles owned a kerosene lantern. Naifa smelt the smoke from the coconut leaves, which were burnt to chase out the mosquitoes that swarmed every year at this time in the evening when the sun went down. It was the month of August, the middle of the hurricane season. Naifa no longer went to school. She had passed through all the classes in the one-room school on the island. She had finished senior 2 class, the last class where girls remain for 1 year. After that, they stayed home. Sometimes they got married. The boys who left school would do laboring work on the lands belonging to Mr. Caesar Augustus Jones. Once they did not go to Trinidad or Aruba on the salt barge. September would be her birthday. She would be 22. She did not want to get married or work the land. All she could do was pick salt. In the month of June, just after the school closed, she had visited Mrs. Charles, the school mistress, who taught all the classes, from infants to senior 2. She never forgot that visit. Come in, Naifa. Mrs. Charles opened the door. Naifa had been careful to wipe her feet on the mat before entering Mrs. Charles' house. She sat on the edge of the mahogany settee, which had been jammed next to a small piano. From there, she could feel her knees knock against the four dining room chairs, which were placed around the dining table. Other than that, she observed the kerosene stove in the kitchen, one pot on it, and she smelled the strong odor of boiled saltfish all over the room. Mrs. Charles was tall, thin, and black, with a long body. The village children teased her Spider Lady behind her back because she bustled about busily, as if in a constant hurry. When she spoke, she had a habit of nervously waving her hands about, which sometimes knocked her spectacles off her face. Would you like some ginger tea? Mrs. Charles offered. Yes, thanks. Mrs. Charles hustled out into the kitchen. As she listened to the sounds of the kerosene stove being lit and the water boiling, Naifa remembered Mother Rachel and Cousin Mary discussing Mrs. Charles with other women down by the well the Saturday before while they washed clothes. Is Aruba Pointer Charles get her from? I don't know why he feel he had to get a wife from foreign, Mother Rachel said in annoyance, starting the discussion. Cousin Mary responded. She was a postmistress, collector of land taxes for crown lands, and was generally looked up to by the villagers for the settlement of land disputes of all kinds. She always said that she liked to be fair. But remember, Mother Rachel, she's who started the school. What would we have done without a schoolmistress? Remember before that we didn't have any school? Tcha, what she know about teach? She should make some children of her own. Then she could talk about teach. Mother Rachel loudly slapped a khaki pants she was washing on the stone wall to make her point. No, Mother Rachel, no need to be unchristian. What time she have to make children? Since she come here, she teaching all the classes from infants to senior two. Plus, she's directing the church choir and she is president of the Poor People Benevolent Society. She wanted to take over the church choir and the Poor People Benevolent Society. Before she come here, I used to do that work, sacrificing myself for no pay. Nobody asked her to take it over. But Mother Rachel, you can't vex with her for that. Pointer Charles said he wants his wife to play a major role in the church. When you was doing it, he didn't have no wife. Well, all I know is that she's drawing pay from church money for doing something that I used to do for free. That is not how our church money supposed to spend. Her voice rose and the words echoed around the village. Cousin Mary looked around anxiously. Don't take that on, Mother. Hush, hush. You want people to say you're jealous, envious, and unchristian? You know they like how she could play piano for all the church service, church concert, children Bible program, and so forth. You could do that? Cousin Mary patted Mother Rachel's hand, her tone soothing. Mother Rachel grudgingly allowed herself to be calmed. Still, she collected her washing even before they were dry on the stones and left with Naifa. Remembering all the things Mother Rachel had said about Mrs. Charles, Naifa shifted uncomfortably on the settee as Mrs. Charles came back with a small metal teapot, some milk, sugar, and 2 china cups. She poured some tea into one of the cups and placed it on the table. Now, how can I help you? I want to teach, Mom, like you. Naifa picked up the cup and added some milk and sugar to her tea. Mrs. Charles looked surprised. She was quiet for a little while. Well, Naifa, you have very good penmanship, Mrs. Charles responded, waving her thin hand and adjusting her spectacles. You have the patience for teaching? Patience, ma'am? Naifa was puzzled. Well, you are restless. You can't stay still for long. When you teach children, you have to wait for them to catch on. Sometimes you have to say the same thing over and over and over. Mom, you ever pick salt? Of course not. Well, since I was born, I pick a lot of salt. Every single white piece, you have to watch it so it don't get dirty. You have to know how to separate the big piece from the small, grain by grain. Then you have to drain them so no water stay on them. Then you have to watch them so the sun finish drying them. And then you wait and wait for another season, watching the salt pond grow fat and then dry until it bears some more. That take plenty patience, ma'am. Well, I guess so. But soon you will not have time to teach. You will get married and have a husband and children to look after. No men round this village to get married to, Naifa muttered, looking away from Mrs. Charles. Well, just bear patience. You will find a good man. Look at me. I waited till I was 35 and I didn't give up. Look how lucky I was. Pointer Charles came all the way to Aruba and found me. Mrs. Charles waved her hand. You don't think I was lucky? Her voice sounded anxious. Yes, ma'am. Naifa turned her head away. Suddenly, Mrs. Charles gripped Naifa's wrist hard, her fingernails digging into the girl's skin. Naifa, you don't think I am lucky? Why you turn your head? Nothing. Don't mumble. Something wrong? Nothing wrong, Mrs. Charles. I have to go help Mother Rachel grind the corn. Mrs. Charles suddenly let go Naifa's hands. Then she slumped back in her chair. She was sweating so heavily the armpit of her green dress was stained. She pulled a handkerchief from her bosom, wiped her forehead and hands, fanned herself nervously with the handkerchief. I feel so hot. It's the change of life. Your mother didn't have the change of life? Like it have me crazy. Tears were beginning to gather at the corner of her eyes. Then they slowly trickled down. Naifa clutched the hem of her dress and looked away. Mrs. Charles sat up suddenly. Why are you gripping the hem of your dress like that? Naifa quickly dropped the dress corner she was twisting. Mrs. Charles walked up and down the sitting room. Pointer Charles is my husband. Mine. We married 15 years now. 15 years I have been here. You know how long that is? 15? She stopped pacing and looked at Naifa. I work hard to do everything I can to be a good wife. But everybody in this place still call me the lady from Aruba. Like I just reached. And they ask me when I going back home. And don't think I don't hear about how young girls like to go around him just to get the little money we have. I hear that one of them making a baby for him. They think he will leave me for one of them. Well, I am giving you a message to give him, to give them. Mrs. Charles stood up and gestured around the dining parlor with its three-piece settee, the dining table with 4 chairs, and the kitchen with the brand new kerosene stove. Any one of them who think I going to walk out and leave all this for them, crazy. You tell them that. Naifa put down her tea, stood up, and quickly went to the door. Yes, Mrs. Charles, Naifa mumbled, running out the house. Now, in the deepening twilight, Naifa noticed that so much time had passed. Her bucket was almost full. She sat back on her haunches, still thinking about that visit to Mrs. Charles. She remembered what Mother Rachel had done when she found out about it the day after. How you so out of place, Naifa? The blow Mother Rachel landed on her ears sent Naifa flying into the corner of the thatch hut, hitting her head against the mud wall. What I do, Mother Rachel? Naifa placed her hand to the spot where her head was already swelling with a bruise. Mother Rachel picked up a tin bamboo stick and raised it over Naifa. How you ask Pointer wife if she could make you teach? You talk to me about that first? You think it right that a stranger must know what you want before me, who born and raised you? But mother, I just wanted to ask you some question. Still the blows with the piece of bamboo kept coming until Mother Rachel, exhausted, threw the bamboo in the corner. You not doing nothing without telling me first. You hear? Nothing. 3 months passed. Since that time, Naifa did not talk to Mrs. Charles about teaching or anything else. When she went to church and Pointer Charles rubbed her collarbone during the blessing, she felt Mrs. Charles watching. Naifa suddenly realized that it was night and she had no flambeau. Hurriedly, she picked up the 25 pounds of salt, hoisted it up on her head, and picked her way up as swiftly as she could from the salt pond to her house by the lagoon. Salt. Everywhere was salt. Everything was salt. The next day was Saturday, and she woke up before daybreak, hurriedly ate the piece of fried leftover cornbread and fish Mother Rachel put on the table so that she could reach to the salt pond to pick salt. Hurry you! Your brother's gone to the salt pond already. Only you dragging your feet. You don't know we have to fill them barrel before the rain come? I would have already gone with them, but I have to wait for you. How you so slow? Remember, we still have to go to the well to wash clothes when we finish picking the salt. Mother Rachel walked with Naifa to the salt pond, 2 large buckets in each hand. As they walked through the village, Mother Rachel called out to her friends on the road. Morning, Geraldine. How is the family? You think it will rain today? No, Mother Rachel, rain not coming. Not until we finish pick all the salt. God, Lord, watching over us. He know we need the salt. It was easy for Naifa to pick salt when Mother Rachel was with her. There was no time to daydream or complain. In a short time, they were finished. The buckets were full, and the salt was stored in the barrel under the house. After that, Naifa and Mother Rachel walked 1 mile to the village well to wash clothes, as they did every Saturday. There was no fresh water on the island, except what they gathered in wooden barrels and buckets when it rained. Everyone used the water from the well to drink, bathe, cook, and wash their clothes. They reached the well. Other women were there washing, gossiping, and telling stories. Beating the clothes on the rock, the women shared 1 bar of soap, passing it from hand to hand. Mother Rachel picked a spot above the well, put down her bundle of clothes, and scrubbed, rinsed, and wrung out while she told her story. All the women stopped and listened as if they were hearing it for the first time. My granny told me how it was. From she was a little girl, they always used to have salt in this village. Always. When the salt pond bare, they picked and what they could and they put up some. They used it to cook and clean wounds and salt the fish the men caught in the sea. And the rest, they didn't bother with it. They left it right there till when the rains came and it would wash it all down to the sea until the next harvest. Every year, faithful the salt pond would bear. My mother told me that is how she met it. Nobody knew when the salt pond would bear, and they never bothered to interfere with it. When it came, it came. Mother Rachel paused to throw 4 pairs of thick khaki pants into a bucket of fresh water. Dipping each one once, twice, 3 times, her fat black arms lifted the pants high up, wrung out the water from top to bottom, then threw it into an enamel basin to soak in starch. She took in washing for the men who had no women to do for them, like old man Thomas, the church warden, whose wife had died 6 years before. She washed for sailors who came on the salt barge and got stranded on the island, or for anybody who could pay 25 cents apiece. Starching and ironing was 5 cents extra. Sunday clothes was 50 cents. My grandmother and my mother say that one Sunday morning, the strongest hurricane that ever come to this island reached. The wind blew down the place, and for 10 days after, it rained. This village got so mashed up, they frightened. Granny and my mother hid under the church roof. When the church roof blew away, they hid under the church floor. When it done, you should have heard the bawling. So much people dead. She poured fresh water into her wash basin. I was only a small girl, but I still remember the bawling. I still remember how this island got crushed right down to the ground. All the peanuts, peas, sweet potato, corn, everything we used to plant, gone, gone, gone. Granny said they buried over 100 dead people. And for months, no help from outside reach. She stopped washing and straightened up, her hands on her hips. In those days, it wasn't like now. Nobody had transistor radio. Only when the mailboat passed every 3 months or when the fishermen went out into deep water to the mainland, you get news. But after the hurricane, all the fishing boats destroyed. For months, nobody could go out to sea. Granny said that all the corn they had put up after the harvest get wet and spoiled. They had to eat dry coconut for months. They couldn't fish. All the fishing nets smashed up. They nearly starved to death. Mother Rachel picked up a white cotton shirt and rinsed it off in a bucket. Then the salt pond started to bear. For 3 months straight, they picked salt. As they picked the salt, they put it up in big barrel the hurricane had washed up. Then one day, a large barge passed going south on the way to Trinidad. The captain took some of the salt and sell it in Trinidad. You never see so much money come back to this village. I was a small girl, but I still remember how everything changed after that. Plenty people start to leave and go Trinidad on the salt barge. Plenty of them never come back. That's how my father left and gone and never come back. That's how my 3 children father gone too. He even reached Aruba to work with the oil company, I hear. But I never know for sure because he never write and he never come back. 10 years now, he never come back to me and them children. Mother Rachel paused. Her shoulders drooped for a while. She lowered her head as if venerating a dead relative or friend who she could barely remember. Then she squared her shoulders and lifted up the enamel basin filled with wet clothes. But what to do? Can't do nothing. That done and gone. One mouth less to feed. She looked around at the other women, and it's all of we lot and portion. Not so? Not me alone. Like Pointer Charles says all the time, the Lord give it and the Lord take it away. At least we have the salt. One by one, the women nodded. They were alone to bear the burden, but at least they had the salt. One by one, they picked up their washing and started to pound and scrub and rinse and wring out as the burning sun scorched their skin. The next morning, Mother Rachel went to church with Pointer Charles to prepare the Sunday evening service, so Naifa went alone to the salt pond with her bucket. She stood watching the shining white crystals crusting the pond. She sucked her teeth and threw the bucket on the ground. Every time the salt pond was bearing, she had to work hard. She knew her 2 brothers, Raymond and John, were just waiting to leave. She heard them whispering the night before when Mother Rachel was asleep. When the salt barge come again, I go in. Raymond couldn't talk low. He had a deep voice like a big man. He was the oldest boy, 19, already with thick black hair on his chest. Me too. I can't wait, John had answered. Only women stick around this place. Nothing to do here. Plenty to do, but no money. Raymond had laughed. I going to reach Aruba like Papa and make big money. Naifa listened to them as they talked and laughed, biting down her fingernails. When they left, she would be alone with Mother Rachel. She would have to bear the hard work with her, picking salt, taking it to the barge, plus cooking and sweeping the yard. And when Mother Rachel got old, she would have to look after her until she died. She was the daughter. She couldn't leave. It was now August month. The salt barge would be coming soon. September was coming around, and another birthday would pass. Naisfa decided that she would talk secretly to Tika, her best friend, after service. That evening after church service, she made sure she did not linger but was the first to rush out. She met Tika slowly walking home by herself. Tika and Raymond were walking out. They had even talked wedding. Naifa ran up beside her. Tika, you have no brothers. It's just you and your mother. You don't want to run away? Tika's head swung around. Her eyes were wide. Run away? Where? Why? Well, because you will have to do everything. Pick salt, cook, clean. Naifa, but that is why we are girls. What else we born to do? We could go on the barge to Trinidad or Aruba. I could meet Papa, you could work. Trinidad, Aruba, so far from home? You crazy? Only men can go on the barge. I hear they all sleep together in the same room. You want to sleep with a room full of men? No. Well, then what you want to leave for? Well, if I leave, then I go away and learn everything and become smart and teach like Mrs. Charles and have a piano in a big house. Girl, you stupid. You will live by yourself in the big house. Then I will find a man to live with me. Which man? Ha! Every man who here want to leave. And those who can't leave so drunk, you don't want them next to you. Tika, suppose Raymond decide to go on the salt barge. You don't care if Raymond go away and never come back? Well, no, as long as he send the money from Aruba every month. Look round, Naifa. How much women in this place have man still here with them? Naifa thought about it. She thought about all the mothers and aunts and grandmothers she knew. She couldn't think about one who had a good 2 foot of a man still with them, other than the drunken one, the lame, the half blind, and the half crazy. They all gone. We stay. We mind the place. And we pick the salt, Naifa added bitterly. August came and went. On September 15, 2 days before her birthday, Naifa knelt on the ground by the salt pan picking salt. She heard the talk around the village. Tomorrow the salt barge would come. The thought would not go away. Picking up the pigtail bucket, Naifa hunched down in the shade of a mangrove bush, carefully scraping the white crystals into her palm. Why I want to leave? For what? It was hot. Sweat trickled down between her breasts. Still she stayed, gathering the salt, pouring it into the bucket until the sun went completely down and she had to stop. She stood up, stretched her aching back. Naifa, Naifa, where the worthless girl child? She heard Mother Rachel calling out in the darkness even before she saw the flambeau she was carrying. Girl, how you make night catch you? You want Duppy go with you? Yes, I want Duppy go with me. It's better than staying here. The words were out before she could catch herself. Where the bucket? Here, I hope it's full. The salt barge coming the day after tomorrow. Mother Rachel picked up the bucket with expert ease, hoisting it up to rest on the cloth she put on the top of her head. Let's go. We have church tonight. We're going to stay there and pray. A girl child like you have too much demon. They walked up the hill down to the lagoon where they lived. It was dark when they reached the small house. Naifa walked in behind her mother. The salt barge was coming the day after tomorrow. Suppose it was this time Raymond or John was going away. Mother Rachel, what time we going to the salt barge? 6 o'clock in the morning, like every other time. Why you want to know? Nothing. Well, it don't have nothing to do with you. I going with Raymond and John with the salt. Since you start getting fresh with me, you staying at home here. The three salt barrels, which always stood in the corner of the small house, were 5 feet tall, dark and brown, and made of wood. They had been old rum caskets, which had washed up on the shore one day. Raymond and John had pulled them out of the water, scrubbed them clean, and left them for 1 month in the hot sun to dry. Now they were full to the brim with precious salt, 1 cent a pound. It would be weighed and paid in good English money, pound, shilling, and pence. Mother Rachel would collect and then keep the money in the biscuit tin. Naifa had watched her mother move the bed one night and sink the tin in a hole dug in the ground. Little by little, mother would draw money from the tin to buy oil, flour, and at Christmas, some pork meat. When the salt barge came, Naifa usually went along to check the money her mother received. She was the only one who could read and write. Her mother could add figures in her head, but she couldn't write nor sign her name on the collection paper from the barge. Day after tomorrow, for the first time, she would be left behind. John will have to sign with the X like the rest of people. So much years I sent he to that school, and he can't even write his name. I don't see how that woman, Pointer Charles married to from Aruba, never teach him anything. Mother Rachel, you know John used to run away and not go to school. Even when he go to school, he just used to be there playing marble. Naifa was quick to answer. Girl, don't talk back to me. That woman is the problem. How much other people I hear say that their boy children go to the school and come out done same way. Since she reached so long, every child in this village should have learned to read and write. The next day, as her brothers and mother Rachel prepared the salt, Naifa was quiet. She shelled the sack of dried corn, which she and mother Rachel harvested from the small patch of provision ground far from the village, where they planted corn, peas, and sweet potato. After she finished shelling the corn, she ground it to a fine powder, stored it in the flour bags Mother Rachel bought from the village shop. Mother Rachel, I want to stop going to church service. What kind of stupidness is that you're saying? I frightened for Pointer Charles. Don't try my patience, child. The Lord will punish you until you're dead. Anyway, Pointer Charles was asking just last night if you could help him write out the church service notice on the blackboard every evening. Pointer Charles is a good man. He born and grow here. I know all his family ever since. You know his father is an outside child for Master Augustus Jones. He tell me that he entitled to plenty land here in this village. Anyway, you see that woman he married to? He will soon get tired of she. She old and miserable, and she getting change her life already. He soon leave she, mark my words. That evening, Naifa waited outside the schoolhouse door till all the children had left. Since the time after Mother Rachel had beat her for talking to Mrs. Charles, she always put her eyes down when she passed Mrs. Charles. Now she didn't know what she would say. She entered the schoolhouse. Mrs. Charles looked up from where she was seated at her desk. Mrs. Charles, can I talk to you, please? What it is about this time? Her voice was tired. Naifa looked down at her bare feet in the sand. Mother Rachel say Pointer Charles want me to help him write out church service notice on the blackboard at church every evening. I think you could do it better than me. I mean, you could write plenty better than me. Naifa's eyes looked straight at Mrs. Charles, haunted. There was a long silence. Naifa was surprised to see the trickle of tears in the corner of her eyes. Come, sit down. Mrs. Charles blew out a long breath. You come to tell me this. Why? Because, because Naifa couldn't continue. She clutched the hem of her dress. How old are you, Naifa? 21, ma'am. Mrs. Charles wiped the corner of her eyes with her handkerchief. When I was your age, all I wanted was to get married and settle down. My mother dead, my father dead. I was glad to get married. I don't want to get married. I want to go away from here. I want to see the outside. I want to teach like you. Naifa interrupted quickly. Things are very different on the outside, Naifa. But I still want to see for myself. I don't just want to stay here and pick salt. Suddenly, Mrs. Charles reached out and squeezed Naifa's hands in hers. Okay, I will help you get on the salt barge tomorrow. Don't tell Mother Rachel anything. Naifa trembling. Mother Rachel will beat me if she find out. I have no money, nothing. Don't worry about Mother Rachel. She wanted to give you the Pointer Charles, didn't she? Naifa couldn't answer. Didn't she? And he will make her stop you, won't he? Look at me, look at me. Mrs. Charles forced the girl to look up into her face. Naifa nodded. Mrs. Charles let go Naifa's hand. She doubled over her desk like she had been punched and was silent for a long, long time. Then her shoulders heaved and Naifa heard the muffled sound of crying. Finally, she stopped and wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. Naifa made up her mind. Even before the salt barge bellowed its horn from out at sea and the fishermen from the village started blowing conch shells in reply, people with barrels of salt started pulling them down to the shore to be ferried out. Naifa pulled the small suitcase Mrs. Charles had given her from where she had hidden it behind the outhouse. It held her Sunday church dress, 2 day dresses, 1 underslip, 3 underpants, her only pair of shoes, and her prayer book. She had no money except a £5 note. Mother Rachel would not be back until dark. The salt barge was docked a mile offshore, and the loading and unloading took all day, bringing the goods off in small canoes, taking out salt in the barrels. Finally, it was night. Naifa slipped out of the house, walked 2 miles to the spot that Mrs. Charles told her the boat would be waiting. Heart hammering in her chest, she hid in the bushes until she saw the shape of a small boat along the shore. Beside the boatman, there was someone else in the boat. Naifa waded into the shallow water, her case held high above her head. She gripped the edge of the boat. The boatman grabbed her suitcase. Then, placing one leg over the side, she pulled herself in. The other person in the boat turned to face her, holding out a hand. It was Mrs. Charles.